Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I'm a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today and that's a good question, on October 17th, 2025 at approximately 8 p.m. PST. Now, I've made it my life's calling to remind people that working together, we can make this a better world for virtually everybody. Now, I bill myself as a spiritual guide because the tools I offer are the exact same tools I personally use in my day to day life. And the philosophies of life I talk about are the precise philosophies I guide virtually every decision I make by. With this in mind, I know these tools will work for you because they continue to work for myself and literally thousands of others with varying degrees of success depending on their own personal efforts. Now, before we get into things today, hats off to Storm because in spite of everything going on in his life, he is still here in the background making sure everything runs here properly with the technological side. He's also the one that eliminates problem children before they become problem children. Eliminates as in kicks them out of the room. Then we have LA Moon in the house. She is our primary moderator inside the chat room, keeping the conversation going and making certain things stay on track. Now, we have Mike Jones is in with the gold. How you doing, Mike? Glad you could join us. And right behind Mike, we have Operation Shutdown coming in with the silver. Operation, how's it going? Now, the nice part about it, I tried explaining this whole topic tonight that we're discussing tonight. About 3 years ago, I was on listening in on a station, and somebody in the chat room asked a simple question. Well, I thought it was simple. What they asked was, how is it that we all see all these little ships, but nobody ever sees the mothership? Now, the guy that was on the station, I forget what station it was, or for that matter, what the guy's name was. Not that I tell you anyway. But he had touted himself as being a UFO, an alien technology specialist. So he did the first problem was the woman asked the question. Okay, she asked the question, how can we see the little ships and not the big ones? Okay, and the guy sat there and did the biggest faux pas. He and the host the same. They both left the air dead silent for about 15, 20 seconds. You don't do that. Okay, so they comes back and he finally says, well, I don't know. So I figured the woman needed an answer. So I hadn't said anything. I was waiting for his response. I come back in and I typed into the chat room. I says, well, once you understand the oscillator densification of the tri-transformational equilarity, then it makes total sense. But you got to keep the fractal inversion in consideration to slow the system down. Well, she writes back and goes, is that even a word? Well, I says, yeah, it's not common, but it's an actual word. Okay, for me, it was very much like the term parapsychological. I started using it, almost a decade before it became mainstream. So this woman asked me again. She comes back to me and she goes, "Can you explain this?" I said, "Certainly, but in deference to the show, I won't do it here. So PM me and I'll explain it." Well, 2 hours later, what you're going to hear tonight is a condensed version of what I told her. Now, understand, at the time I was talking to her, first and foremost, I had no knowledge of the terminology at all to help her understand. So we went through the whole thing, and she goes, when she finally pieced it together, she goes, how much education do you actually have? I says, well, I successfully failed college. And so the long and the short of it was she followed what I was talking about, but she had a master's in rocketry and astrophysics. And she says, we barely even hint at this sort of thing in our fourth term. And you're talking about it like it's common sense. Well, to me, it was. Okay. Now, here's the way it works. We have to understand that some of these terms aren't, I don't know what the actual scientific term is, so you're going to have to bear with me on that. But let's go back to basic physics. Okay. According to basic physics, and when I mean basic, I'm talking grade 8. Okay. The smallest at the time, when I was in school anyway, the smallest recognized particle was, your atom was a hydrogen atom, which has only one electron running around it. Now, some of this will make sense to most of you, some may not. But I was taught that the electrons will almost randomly break away from an atom and go and join another one. And I got thinking, like I'm sitting there looking at this going, well, if that happens, and they're saying hydrogen is the smallest atom, what happens when the electron from a hydrogen atom breaks away? Rachel Andrews, how you doing? You are in with the bronze. What happens when an electron breaks away from a hydrogen atom? Okay, that hydrogen atom suddenly has no electrons around it. Now, I call that myself, I call that a null atom. There may be a new term for it. I don't know. Like I said, I'm no scientist. And Renee, you are in with honorable mention. Okay, so that electron breaks away, and there's a whole pile of these null atoms running around. It breaks away from a hydrogen atom. Now, let's assume it connects with a hydrogen atom, with another one. That hydrogen atom now, with 2 electrons going around it, becomes a helium atom. But what we've got is all these null atoms that are traveling through space. Now, here's the kicker with the OTE drive, also known in layman's terms as a perpetual star drive. Okay, because their technology, actually, in all fairness, Rachel, tonight was literally the first night since I've been home from the hospital that I slept in our own bed without paying for the whole night without painkillers. Definitely a step up. Now, you've got all these null atoms floating around, and they're all traveling through space. What mankind does not have the technology to handle yet is when a null atom travels through space, it creates a shock wave in front of it, much like picture a boat going through the water. The atom goes through space and creates a shock wave. Now, the OTE drive picks up on that technology. The technology picks up on that shock wave and feeds it into their drive. Now, there's more to it, and we'll get to that as we go on. Okay, so it does that, feeds it into the drive, and now you've got constant acceleration. If you're my age, you may remember the Hot Wheel tracks with the little booster sets in the tracks. Same idea. Okay, the OTE drive takes that shock wave, picks the momentum out of it, and transfers it to the drive. Net result, you've got essentially unlimited acceleration. Okay, now it's not quick acceleration, it's steady acceleration. But that same atom, as it travels through space, we do it that way. That same atom, let's do it that way so I can see. As it travels through space, okay, it creates a shock wave up here, pushing things along, but it's also creating a drag. Now, when they when the pilots desire to slow down, they tap into the drag behind the null atom to slow the system down. Net result, they can move phenomenal distances at a staggering level. Okay, now this is just the basics. And absolutely, if you've got questions, do ask. Where are we here? Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Now, that the technology they've got, they take the energy itself to run the engine, but they also have an interesting setup because they don't exactly have a cloaking, and most of them don't have a cloaking machine, but what they do have is an optical transfer. So what they do is all of them built into the hull is an entire set of relays. And all these relays are done, they're powered by the OTE drive. Okay. They take whatever's in front of the ship or whatever's on one side of the ship and they transfer it to a display on the other side of the ship. Okay. So what you're looking at is you look like you're still looking at the stars on the other side. Okay, this is why I say if you're watching for a passing starship, watch for the stars blinking out, because what's happening is as the ship travels along. Now, let's say you're on the side that's seeing the ship. It's taking a live stream from my side of the ship and flipping it over to your side. So you're not going to see anything except on the leading edge or on the trailing edge. Okay, so what you end up with is not so much a cloaking device as an optical diversion. What do we got here? Operation Shutdown is asking, do the smaller ships still have a similar power system? They do. They just don't have the amount of power required to create the total optical diversion. Okay, but it's simply a pared down system. I mean, if you think about it, if you take a lawnmower and you supercharge it, you can get a pretty quick moving lawnmower. Good luck keeping up with it. But yeah, they're just, and bear in mind, people have made modifications to the OTE drive just like they do to the vehicles on Earth. But this is why the big ships can transfer so much energy. Okay, it's odd, but there's a lot more that can be done with it, depending on the size of the ship. And bear in mind, not all of them have it. Like when you take a look at the Moldakian Colosseum ships, they simply create an energy output that throws them slightly out of sync, so you can't really get a clear picture. But the OTE drive is one of these revolutionary discoveries that enabled the Galactic Consortium to travel light years in almost a heartbeat without using wormholes. Okay, I mean, you can travel at phenomenal speeds if you know how to handle it. And of course, the other catch here with humans, because our technology is so slow right now, okay, it couldn't make the calculations fast enough. And that becomes a problem unto itself. But the OTE drive is literally feeding off the shockwave caused by the null atoms. Okay, well, my apologies. Caused by the null atoms and the transiting electrons. Anything that's creating a shockwave, the OTE drive will pick up on. And let's face it, I think we've got 118 elements on Earth. I've seen an elemental table with 250. But But the OTE drive draws on the shock wave before and after transiting atoms. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And to think, it took me 2 hours to figure out how to get that across, because I had no idea what the terminology was in this world. Now, here's the other part of this. It got called the oscillator densification of the tritranspatial equilarity. Well, oscillator densification literally means, as it sounds, it alters the density of the ship. Okay, it alters it from one state to another and back again, as in it's an oscillating pattern. And it does it, it's built into the computer system they use to operate it. Do not ask me to explain that part. Okay, but when you take a look at that, that's the oscillator densification. What it does is expand and contract the space between the molecules of the ship. Okay, this enables it to pass sometimes through a star or through an asteroid belt without taking damage. Okay, then you got the tritranspatial. Well, the reason we call it that is because when you look at in the tritan and transpatial, you have the temporal time of today, tomorrow, and yesterday all happening at the same time, and here, there, and everywhere in between, all happening at once. Okay, so 3 phases in time and space. Okay, and yeah, I realize we are talking about something there is no way on the planet I'm going to prove. I just don't have the current mathematical capacity for it. Not here. Now, the neat part about it from that standpoint is when you put all this together, you have the capacity to take a ship the size, the size of some of these ships are insane. Okay, but you can take this massive ship and move it through space without destroying it or the orbital contingent and the orbital patterns of the stars it's going by. Okay, and yes, there are ships big enough to destroy orbits. Lunar, how we doing? Glad you could join us. Hey, I'm glad you dropped in just the same. I haven't seen you in a while. So hopefully things are going well. One day mankind will figure out how to do this. Okay. But of course, the biggest problem that we got to remember there is the scientists have to let their mind expand a little further than what they have. Okay. And yes, I will tell you wholeheartedly, I am absolutely not. Oh. What we got? Operations asking which alien race has the largest ships. Well, I'm not sure about the largest ships, but I will tell you the Archon. Well, if you take a look at the drawing a complete the Caboran are planet-sized. We'll start there. Now they're not a ship per se. Okay, but the Caboran are all Caborans are planets. Okay, but not all planets are Caborans. Then you have the Archon, and the Archon at their largest state feed on small Archon on small Caboran. Now, there are some races that have enslaved Archon and turned them into living bioships. So that would probably be the ones those ships And I'm just trying to think. The most likely, well, the Xenon have done that. Okay, which is really kind of funny. But the Xenon have enslaved the Archon as living bioships. And those aren't the only bioships out there. Okay, one of the things we got to realize is mankind sees ships as a technological item. Some of these races grow their own ships, like they literally raise them from, if you will, hatchlings. And yes, I will get into those a little later, just not tonight. But the OTE drive, when they made that breakthrough, all of a sudden they were able to travel distances even faster than traveling through a wormhole. Okay, I can't give you. I think it's called astronomical units. I can't tell you the speeds. Okay, and it probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to most of you anyway. Okay, but what we do know is that with the OTE drive came the capacity for the consortium to get to all sides of the local, of what they consider local space in record time. And to give you an idea, when they first developed that, the Ennead, what you know as the Egyptian gods, were already in, if you will, appointed power by the ancient Egyptians of our world. And of course, the consortium knew about it centuries before, but couldn't do anything with it. Okay, so what ended up happening is as soon as the OTE drive was brought up to functional speed, they dropped in and ousted the Ennead. Okay, of course, this is why the Norse and the Greek gods, also got evicted in almost record time and just all of a sudden ceased to be here. Because they got told, guys, you're not gods. Go away. Hence the starting of the consortium laws. But the OTE drive, not only is it safer to use it than to go through a wormhole, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but wormholes have a bad habit, if you touch the side of them, of spontaneously collapsing. This is no fun for anybody. So once they had the OTE drive running, they didn't have to utilize the wormholes themselves. And let's face it, for the bigger ships, navigating a wormhole is a royal pain. One of the things that we did that I did find, because I got to see how the OTE drive works. Okay, and this is why when I'm looking at this thing, I'm going, and mankind thinks they've got technology. They got nothing on it. But don't get me wrong, mankind is doing a phenomenal job with what they're doing, with what they're working with. They just have to do that thing that that so many people tell their 5 and 6 year olds to quit. Use your imagination. Okay, now, way back, the theory of relativity, Einstein tried passing it on. Now, don't get me wrong. The formula they did give the scientists, they finally gave them, was a working formula, and it did have relativity involved. But what he was trying to tell them, and see if you can wrap your brain around this, the theory of relativity he was trying to pass on was 1 plus 1 equals 3. Problem, it's not math. Okay, and that's a whole different ballgame. But once you understand that part, the OTE drive becomes easy to work with. And oddly enough, the lady I was talking about that had the master's in astrophysics and rocketry said she could follow what I was talking about, but she didn't quite fully understand it. And for me to explain it is going to be a royal pain, although I'm doing my best. So hopefully this is making sense. And what do we got going on here? So when we look at the OTE drive, understand it is like there's a lot of things going on at the same time. And yes, these guys still use fusion and fission reactors for garbage disposal. And they take those same reactors and utilize that energy to add to their own power cores. Okay. It's a bit convoluted, some of what they do. Well, I shouldn't say convoluted. It's very direct, very to the point. But for mankind to do it, you'd have to break it down into a number of steps to handle it. But yes, that OTE drive, because of the way it works, they've got the anti-graviton landing pads where they transfer the information, they transfer the energy from the drive into the gravity generators in order to be able to land ships that are way too big to travel in atmosphere. And they basically bring them into a geosynchronous orbit and then transfer the information, the power to the graviton landing pads in order to set. They don't actually fly the ship into atmosphere. They simply use the graviton field to push it through the atmosphere and land it. Now, of course, that's not likely to happen here, on Earth anytime soon. Now, I unfortunately still have a tiny monitor. What we got? Now, Brad Thorson. By the way, Bob, my apologies. Bob Thorson, how you doing? Glad you could join us. Has gone, what race built the UFO I saw in 1972? A dull gold elliptical craft, 40 feet wide, that hovered at treetop level. Moved forward smoothly without sound. Had a wide tinted window facing us. At 50 feet away now, the gold tint may well have been a personal choice on it. Okay. What did I do with it? Back here. I forgot to look up the other one. I'll tell you, trying to recover from a cardiac arrest and blood clot and what have you really screws up your time management. But I was supposed to look up another thing here, so I got to put that down. You said that's a gold elliptical or a gold cylindrical? Let's see. Elliptical. Oh! Now, those I've seen. Of course, they're usually done in silver. The gold is probably, and the best I can tell you with the coloring on it, is it may well have been literally the way the sun hit it, or the position of the sun during its arrival. And that is, most of them are, in all fairness there, Bob, most of the ships don't make a whole lot of noise. Or more to the point, they make noise so far above mankind's hearing. As a matter of fact, it's way above dogs' hearing. Wide tinted window facing us. The fact it was only 50 feet away is amazing. Yeah, I gathered that when you went elliptical. It just took me a minute to piece it together. Now, I know I came across those. Can't tell you the name of it right off the top of my head, but I do know it's in the notes. One of the things that I will tell you about that is that ship there is no doubt if it was that size and it only had the one window. I can tell you this much, if I remember, don't do that to me. My screen just went blank and just about had a problem. With it having a window like that, you're looking at a research vessel. Bob, are you by any chance anywhere near water where you saw this thing? Because the design of that is an underwater design. And yes, there are underwater ships. That almost sounds like somebody did a real neat stunt with the Udina. Okay. Told you I knew where it was. The Udina, now you've seen the Udina, the ships. Well, if you watched the movie Arrival, you've seen an Udina ship. Okay. Those were the helipods that wrote with ink in the water. The ship you're referring to, with it being on its side, they are related, but those are from the Udira. Yeah, that ship pattern you're designing. The reason it took me a minute to remember is because that's in volume 2. Okay, but that's the Udira. Now the Udira are races very similar to the Udina, except they have 8 legs, and none of them are paddle shaped. The Udira they look almost identical to our Terran octopi. At least I think that's the right term for plural. Might be octopuses, but I think octopi is right. Oh, there you go. See, now when we're talking, yeah, Salt Lake City is an interesting little place. But yeah, when you start looking at the oval shapes, the oval ones, usually like the most common place you see them are the Udira and the Udina and the Udira. But the Udina, their ship travels vertical and are not designed for entering the atmosphere except setting down into it. The Udira come in horizontal, but that's because they also go underwater. And the Udina do not. At least not very far. And you can see why. See, there are a few other ships that are different shaped. And yes, I am putting together a booklet that's just going to contain the ships themselves. I'm telling you, my last 3 months has been a nightmare. Well, it's been good in the long run, but it's been a bit of a mess. But the OTE drive is utilized in many of these ships, but it is the primary drive utilized in the consortium ships. Oh, there we go. Now, of course, it depends with the LA, with the silver scar-shaped ones. It depends on whether or not there were windows, whether there were no windows, one bank of windows, or 2 banks of windows. 3 different races. Okay, all of them ride the same ships, and yet all are not related. Because when you look at the cigar-shaped ones, okay, and yes, the cigar shape, because of their positioning in the consortium, the consortium has released, like, it's not top secret information, but the only people that actually build it and install it are consortium starship, the consortium starship manufacturing. But they build them for the Pleiadians, for the Sarkon and for the Strazazians. Here we go. One bank in LA is just going, one bank of windows disappeared as soon after I saw it. Okay, if it's one bank, you're looking at the Sarkon. Now, the Sarkon, we've covered them before. They are a reptilian race, but they are the average, and like the smaller adults are 12 to 15 feet tall. Okay, so these are big little ships, but that would be a Sarkon ship. But the OTE drive is, and it's not what's the word for it? It's protected technology, but it is complicated. And yes, other races have tried building similar systems. Problem is, if you do it wrong, you blow up a lot of ships and or planets. I mean, think about what happens if you use the graviton pads to get your ship off the ground, and before you're completely clear of the atmosphere, you kick the OTE drive in. What's going to happen to the atmosphere? You know, this is one of the things that we have to take a look at. But the OTE drive itself, you know, mankind's is looking at it going, well, if you got a vehicle that travels that fast, you got to remember, while you're building a ship that travels that fast, you also have to have the control mechanisms to handle trajectory change. Okay, so it's not just a simple thing of let's make it go faster. Anybody working on cars on Earth or on planes knows if you don't get the aerodynamics right, especially for in atmosphere, and you do something, you push the speed too fast, it'll tear itself apart. Okay, in outer space, you don't have that problem, but you do have the problem of a power fluctuation and popping back into real space while you're inside a planet or inside a star. Either one is not going to result well, at least not on your part. So, I mean, this is what we're doing. This is why I say the OTE drive, by the way, they are working on, and I already know they're working on it. They are working on a variation on it. I don't know if I've got it in the book, and I don't have that right now. But they are looking at a personal transporter that will transmit the individual light years, like stepping into an elevator, and you travel light years across the cosmos. Now, of course, we have this other neat little problem with the OTE drive that you got to remember. Okay, the fractal inversion literally is because they have to flip the system and transfer it, and it's got to be a slow transition comparatively, because they've got to slow it down. And as they're grabbing the drag from the tail behind the molecules, they have to release the catch on the shockwave, and it's a very delicate balance they've got to do. This is where computers come in real handy. You know, one thing that I like about the OTE drive is once you know how to utilize it, they can actually, it's not really that difficult from their standpoint. They can shift the thruster just enough that you can modify your trajectory. Now, here's the thing. If you've got a cylindrical ship, and it's traveling along, you got to have thrusters at the top and your drive engine at the back. And the reason for the thrusters at the front is so that you can move the front easier than trying to figure out how to change the back end. Because you notice you don't have wheels on the back. Okay, but the other thing that happens with the OTE drive, and this is one of the reasons why they've got to make sure that the force fields and the armor on the front end are up to par with the OTE drive. When you upgrade a drive, you can't just upgrade the drive. It's not like putting a new engine into a car, because the moment you upgrade the drive and it travels faster, well, whatever you got for a deflector field on the front of the ship, whatever you've got here, okay, if it isn't upgraded to accommodate the faster travel, this deflector field is going to buckle. And once that happens, the entire ship gets pulled apart. Okay, picture what happens to people in a sandstorm. Okay, or in a swarm of piranha. Now that's dark. Okay, so the OTE drive has many, like they take that energy and shift it to multiple systems in their ships. Not the least of which is the creation of a wormhole, of a manufactured wormhole in front of the ship. Now, a wormhole, usually, you gotta remember, twists through space. Okay, if you're manufacturing one, if you're generating one and just punching a hole, okay, now we go to D&D terminology, or either D&D terminology as in Dungeons and Dragons, or if you like it more, back to Bugs Bunny. Okay, you remember the portable hole that you just open up and all of a sudden you pass through from one side of a wall to the other? Well, a technologically generated wormhole is more accurately called a borehole. Bob goes, didn't the drive create a gravity bubble that allows it to travel through the atmosphere and water and keep the occupants unaffected by inertia? The OTE drive is what powers the graviton fields, and it's those that create the inertia dampeners. So in essence, Bob, you are correct. It is the power source that they use to activate the other onboard systems. But you are right, because the moment at that speed, if you hit too fast into terrestrial water, you'll create a shockwave that wipes out the shoreline. Okay, and this is why they're very careful, because you got to remember, terrestrial water, and I don't just mean on Earth, but terrestrial water has a surface tension, and you've got to hit it slowly, because if you hit it at the speed of a star drive, you're going to punch a shockwave through the rest of the physical matter. And much as the field will protect the people inside the ship, it won't protect them from outside the ship. And you can picture what that's going to be like. At least I think you can if you've watched any of the meteor action shows, things like Deep Impact, or any of the meteors that you've seen hit. These are just some of the things that had to be taken into consideration. But their deflector field doesn't protect the planet in front of them, or the ship for that matter. Now, there are ships that are literally built with a miniature OTE drive, and they are designed for punching holes in larger ships. Because what you do is you hyperdensify the front of the leading hull and put your field up in front of it. But what you're doing with that field is you're reinforcing the molecular stability or the molecular cohesion, so that when you punch the drive into order, it's like a supercharged bullet, and that will cut through some of the biggest ships available. You don't want to get into a space battle with these people. And we are down to the 15-minute mark. Thank you very much for that, LA. So I'm hoping this is making sense. And absolutely, I do need these videos up on YouTube for free. Okay. Of course, if you've got questions, even if they're a little more technical, absolutely drop me a line. I will do what I can to explain it. Unfortunately, I am not a scientist per se, so I don't know the modern terminology just yet. For those of you that remember Atlantis, okay, an inertia field takes a moment to kick in. Some of us remember Atlantis. It was no fun when it took off. But that's a story that was done, I think, about 3 years ago. That I did a show on that. But the OTE drive, again, it takes the shock wave of molecules traveling through space in order to power the whole system. Okay, and no, it is not solar powered. Way too many things block off solar power. Okay, and we certainly don't have to worry about things like cloud cover. But you do have to remember, if all of this isn't working in sync, it is going to tear the ship apart. And I'll tell you from people if you've ever experienced that way to go. But when a ship comes apart at the seams, you don't have a lot of time to get to an escape pod. All the time, whenever you see these movies on terrestrial TV, where they show people racing through a ship that's disintegrating to get to their escape pods. When a ship comes apart in space, you spend more time going into outer space than you ever do running down the halls. And you're more than welcome there, Bob. I am looking into some of the other technologies to deal with as well. And of course, documenting what I'm finding. But I'm still going through a good 3 inches of paperwork that I've made notes over the years on. It's a lot of stuff to go through. And of course, things got a little hectic around here for a bit. But the OTE drive, from mankind's standpoint, is probably a good 300-400 years down the road. Okay, simply because they don't have the technological capacity, nor, politely put, the wherewithal to actually see these conventions put into place. When I get told by modern scientists that can't be done, I'm looking at it going, but I've seen it done. Granted, I haven't seen it done on Earth, but I have seen it done. And what we are now looking at, like the OTE drive, they are working on a new version of it. I'm sure of it. They always do. And when I find out about one, I will pass it on. But for the moment, the OTE drive is the state of the art. It is the industry standard at this point. One thing we gotta realize is that this vehicle. Whoa, how you doing? Glad you could make it. That was really poorly said. Yeah, we are. Like I said earlier, last night was the first night since I got home from the hospital that I could spend the entire night in our bed without painkillers. I'll tell you, that's a step up. But that said, we're coming down to the bottom end here. I will be dealing with more technology down the road. Okay, where do we go? Now, just to give you an idea, because we're down to the last 10 here. Tomorrow, we are going to be taking a look at humanity's place in the consortium. I keep asking why we're not involved in it. Okay. We're going to cover that tomorrow. Then on Sunday, we're going to take a look at the importance of communication. Monday, we're going to take a look at stretching your dollar, because on Monday we deal with finance. And Tuesday, we're going to take a look at decluttering your life again. And yes, I repeat some of these because frankly, repetition seems to work. Okay. And again, guys, if you have a topic or if you've got questions you would like to drop in my lap and have us cover, absolutely drop me a line or pop it up in the chat room and I'll do my best to get it onto the roster. Okay. I've got next week laid out. The rest of them I'm starting to work on now. Okay. And of course, you guys, I think, you guys have a holiday coming up here soon. And now we're down to 10 minutes. Christine, thank you very much for that, LA. I'm glad you're keeping an eye on the time. And Christine has made it in. Glad you can make it. Hopefully things have been going well for you. So the OTE drive, in all fairness, it's used for interstellar, but they are using variations on it for terrestrial vehicles and for atmospheric and hydrospheric modes of transportation. Okay, there are a number of things that are being worked on that I'm aware of. Now, we're down to the last 5 minutes, so I'd like to say thank you very much for sharing your time with us tonight. Really appreciate it. Glad to see so many people showing up. I think we're at 13. I think we maxed out. Somewhere around 15, but thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight. Really appreciate it. I will be back again tomorrow at 8 p.m. Pacific. Okay. And we're going to discuss humanity's place in the consortium. Until then, do take care of yourselves and each other. And for pity's sakes, stay positive.